Во имя Отца и Сына и Святого Духа.
Once I talked to an American lady, and she told me during those 70 years in Russia, 70 years of socialism, the Catholic America at least, prayed for conversion of Russia.
Those prayers were added by Pope Pius XI in the 1920s, just after the Communist Revolution, to pray for the conversion of Russia. People prayed for the conversion of Russia in more ways than just that. Our statue of the Holy Mother of God behind our main altar is a statue that came from a convent of sisters, and one of the sisters told us after we received the statue, we went back to thank them for it. She said, it's funny that that statue would end up in Russia, because every night after night prayer, all the sisters would gather around that statue and pray for the conversion of Russia.
От него все, ибо это есть тело мое, которое за вас будет предано.
I just want to thank all people who did that, because I didn't know about that. And it's so important. I want to thank all people who believed in Russia and who had hope for Russia, hope that they received from God.
Christ and the church will outlive any enemy. In Rome there were tremendous persecutions. Now those emperors are gone and the church is alive. And here there was a persecution probably worse than the one in Rome. And the persecutors are gone and the church is alive. So it's symbolic. The revolution happened in 1917. Lenin made it all the way to Vladivostok, and they declared all of Russia now being as part of the communist system. And then the pressure on religion began. The government felt that the church was no good, it wasn't doing any good for society. Here was the new revolution going to happen, the new heaven on earth, and so you didn't need to talk about heaven and heaven. What difference does that make? So it started with taxation. They couldn't pay their taxes, and so eventually, one by one, the parish buildings were confiscated. They started arresting the priests, and so the last pastor was arrested here in the 30s and was sent to prison in Siberia. The bishop, meanwhile, was exiled outside of the city. He continued to do what charitable work he could. And finally, when the priest was gone and parishioners were decreasing, they were under tremendous pressure. The bishop died in 1933, in January. They say that the martyrs of the Soviet Union are the greatest number of martyrs the church has ever experienced anywhere in the world. The Orthodox Church had over 100,000 priests and nuns killed. And the Catholic Church, almost every day here, we read in our calendar what priest in the Soviet Union was shot on that day, sometime in the history of the church. So they were all eliminated. And the last 5 parishioners of our parish were killed. There were 5 men. They were all arrested after their prayer service, and they were shot. And their political records say that they were arrested for counter-revolutionary religious and political activities. So by about 1938, the Catholic Church here in the Far East pretty well ceased to function.
You cannot chain the word of the Lord. It's going to come out. Someone's going to be influenced. The very little remnant of this parish that had been closed in 1930 came up above ground and identified themselves.
And here in Vladivostok, it actually happened that after the Pope, John Paul II, went to Poland, probably was 1990 or 1991, then the Catholics who went to Poland to see the Pope met each other and decided that the time was right to begin the church again in Russia, and they began discussing what they could do and decided to place an ad on the radio. Through the ad in the radio, Catholics answered who had been Catholics as children.
У меня бабушка, дедушка, католики.
My grandparents, grandmother and grandpa, were Catholic. My grandmother taught me to pray when I was 4 years old, and it was a very difficult time. It was a time of persecution for your faith. Throughout those difficulties, they kept their faith, and they transmitted that faith to their own children, who are my parents, and my parents gave that faith to us. And I can try to give that to my own children, because faith really is life.
Other people called who said, well, grandmother was a Catholic, so I want to be a Catholic.
Здравствуйте.
Yevgenia made her first communion here in the church before the revolution, and she remembers and describes what the ceremony was like.
И мы впереди шли.
I remember there was a procession around the church. We were the first in line carrying baskets of flowers and icons. When you went in the main door of the church, on the left side on one of the columns was kind of a little balcony up high where the priest would go to preach the sermon. There are a handful of these elderly parishioners that remember the church before it was closed and who are a part of it again. There are always our pride and joy, as we say. Sometimes pure Russians called who had no background in the Catholic Church who said they simply wanted to be Catholics.
Я счастлива, что я узнала истину в жизни.
Yes, I'm happy because I found the truth in life. Truth is that God is not only my Father, but He is the Father of all humanity.
И через Иисуса Христа Он нас спасает всех.
And through Jesus Christ, God saves us all.